The Harrison Group's glass and steel headquarters towered over downtown Manhattan, a monument to my family's success, or so they claimed. I stood in my Uncle Richard's office, my resume clutched in trembling hands, watching him tear apart my dreams with the same casual cruelty he'd shown since I was a child. Marketing degree from a state school? He smirked, barely glancing at the carefully curated portfolio I'd spent months preparing. This is a global investment firm, not some small-town advertising agency. I forced myself to remain calm, though my heart was racing. I graduated summa cum laude, Uncle Richard. I've already built a successful private consulting business. Consulting. He laughed, the sound echoing off his mahogany-paneled walls. You mean that little online venture you run from your apartment? Please, Alexandra, this is Wall Street. We deal with serious money here. If he only knew that my little online venture had quietly grown into Summit Enterprises, one of the most successful private investment firms in the country. Operating entirely through shell companies and private holdings, I'd built a $2 billion empire while my family still thought I was designing websites from my sofa. The position is already filled anyway, my cousin James announced, strolling in without knocking. His custom suit probably cost more than what they thought I made in a year. I recommended someone from my Harvard Business School class. Much more qualified. Of course he had. James had been undermining me since we were children, always ensuring he was seen as the successful one, the worthy heir to the Harrison legacy. He'd never forgiven me for outscoring him on every test in school, even though our grandfather had paid for his private tutors while I studied alone. Speaking of qualified, Uncle Richard leaned back in his leather chair. We're meeting with the Montgomery account team today. Their mysterious CEO is finally sending a representative to discuss expanding their investment portfolio. My pulse quickened slightly. The Montgomery Group was actually one of my shell companies, controlling over $50 million in Harrison Group investments. They had no idea that the elusive CEO they'd been trying to meet for months was sitting right in front of them. Biggest client we've landed this year, James bragged, adjusting his Rolex. Though I doubt you'd understand the complexities of managing that kind of wealth, cousin. I thought about the meeting scheduled for later that afternoon, where my chief financial officer would be representing Montgomery Group's interests. About the documents in my briefcase that could change everything. You should focus on something more appropriate to your skills, Uncle Richard said dismissively. Perhaps that little design business of yours. Leave the real finance to those who understand it. I stood up slowly, gathering my portfolio. You're right, Uncle Richard. I should focus on my own business interests. That's the spirit, he said, already turning to his computer. James, walk your cousin out. We don't want her getting lost on her way to the lobby. As we walked through the trading floor, James couldn't resist one final dig. You know, Alexandra, it's actually good you're not joining us. The Harrison name means something in this industry. We can't risk having it associated with lesser achievements. I stopped at the elevator, turning to face him. You're absolutely right, James. The Harrison name does mean something. But maybe not what you think it means. He frowned slightly, catching something in my tone. What's that supposed to mean? You'll find out soon enough, I said as the elevator doors opened. Good luck with the Montgomery meeting. I hear their CEO can be quite demanding. The confusion on his face was just a preview of what was to come. In less than 2 hours, the Harrison Group would learn exactly who they'd just rejected. And by the end of the day, they'd understand that success doesn't always wear a designer suit or come with an Ivy League degree. Sometimes it arrives quietly, builds patiently, and strikes when they least expect it. As I walked out of the building that had long symbolized my family's power, I smiled, knowing that power was about to shift dramatically. My phone buzzed, a text from my CFO. Everything ready for the Montgomery meeting. Should we proceed as planned? I typed back a single word: execute. The game I'd been playing for years was about to enter its final phase. The Harrison Group was about to learn that they hadn't just rejected a job applicant, they'd insulted their biggest client. And in the world of high finance, that was a mistake they couldn't afford to make. I watched from my private office across the street as the Montgomery Group's sleek black SUV pulled up to the Harrison Group headquarters. My CFO, Sarah Mitchell, stepped out looking every inch the power player in her Armani suit. For 5 years she'd been my public face, attending meetings I couldn't without revealing my identity. My phone buzzed with a text from James. Where did you disappear to? You're missing the show. Our biggest client is here. I smiled, remembering his condescending smirk from earlier. Your biggest client? Are you sure about that? Through my office windows, I could see the conference room where the meeting would take place. Uncle Richard was already there, straightening his tie nervously. James paced behind him, probably rehearsing the pitch he'd spent weeks preparing. Neither of them had any idea what was about to happen. Ms. Mitchell for the Montgomery Group. My assistant's voice came through the intercom. The live stream is ready whenever you'd like to watch. I'd had cameras installed in the Harrison Group's conference room months ago. Legally, of course, through a security contract they'd signed without reading the fine print. Another lesson they were about to learn about attention to detail. Begin recording, I said, settling into my chair as the meeting began to unfold on my screen. Welcome to Harrison Group. Uncle Richard's voice boomed with false confidence. We're honored to finally meet with Montgomery's leadership. Sarah took her seat at the head of the table, my usual spot for video conferences. The honor is ours, Mr. Harrison, though I should correct you on one point. I'm not here to discuss expanding our portfolio. James's smile faltered slightly. I don't understand. The meeting request was to inform you of some changes, Sarah continued, opening her briefcase. The Montgomery Group will be terminating all investments with Harrison Group, effective immediately. The silence that followed was deafening. I watched Uncle Richard's face drain of color as Sarah placed the termination documents on the table. This must be some mistake, he stammered. We've managed your investments brilliantly. The returns are mediocre at best, Sarah cut in. But this isn't about returns. This is about respect. James leaned forward, his arrogance showing through despite his confusion. Respect? We've shown nothing but respect to Montgomery's interests. Really? Sarah raised an eyebrow. Is that why you rejected your CEO's niece for employment this morning? The room froze. I watched James's jaw drop as understanding began to dawn. Uncle Richard gripped the edge of the table, his knuckles turning white. What are you talking about? He managed. Sarah pulled out her tablet, turning it to show them my picture. Alexandra Harrison, founder and CEO of the Montgomery Group, along with several other investment firms you've been desperate to work with. That's impossible, James whispered, but I could see him putting the pieces together. She runs a small consulting business. A cover, Sarah smiled. One that allowed her to build an empire while you were all too busy looking down on her to notice what she was creating. Uncle Richard stood up so quickly his chair toppled backward. Where is she? I need to speak with her immediately. I'm afraid Ms. Harrison is unavailable, Sarah replied coolly. She's in a meeting with Sterling Financial. You know, your biggest competitor? They're very interested in acquiring the assets we're withdrawing from Harrison Group. My phone was already buzzing with frantic messages. James, please tell me this isn't true. Uncle Richard, we need to talk. Immediately. Aunt Patricia, what have you done? Cousin Elizabeth. OMG, is this why you never came to our investment seminars? I ignored them all, watching as Sarah continued to dismantle their world. The termination will be announced publicly tomorrow morning, she was saying. Given that Montgomery Group represents roughly 40% of Harrison Group's managed assets, you might want to prepare your shareholders. 40%? James collapsed into his chair. But that would mean that your cousin has been keeping you afloat for years? Sarah finished for him. Yes. Ironic, isn't it? The family member you dismissed as unqualified was actually your largest client. I watched Uncle Richard age years in minutes as he realized the implications. The Harrison Group stock would plummet once the news broke. Their other clients would panic. The empire he'd built on arrogance and nepotism was about to crumble. Please, he said, his voice barely a whisper. We can fix this. Whatever Alexandra wants. What she wanted, Sarah gathered her documents, was a chance to work with her family, to contribute to the company her grandfather helped build. Instead, you treated her like an embarrassment. Actions, Mr. Harrison, have consequences. As Sarah stood to leave, James made one last desperate attempt. Wait, at least let me talk to her. We're family. Sarah paused at the door. Funny, that's not what you said this morning when you were mocking her state school degree. But I'll pass along your message. Though I should warn you, Miss Harrison has a very long memory and very little patience for people who underestimate her. I watched them sit there shell-shocked as Sarah left the room. Within minutes, my phone was flooded with messages from other family members. Word was spreading fast. My Aunt Patricia just heard what happened. We should talk. Cousin Elizabeth, can you help me get a job at Montgomery? Uncle Richard again, please call me. We can work this out. I shut off my phone and turned to the window, looking out at the city I'd quietly conquered while they were busy doubting me. The Harrison Group's sign glinted in the afternoon sun, but by this time tomorrow their stock would be in free fall. Ms. Harrison, my assistant's voice came through the intercom. Sterling Financial is on line 1. They're very interested in discussing the acquisition opportunity. I smiled, thinking of all the times my family had excluded me from their business discussions, claiming I wouldn't understand the complexities of high finance. Put them through, I said. It's time to show the Harrisons what a state school graduate can really do. The next morning I arrived at my office just as the markets opened. The Harrison Group stock was already down 30%, and business news channels were running constant coverage of the Montgomery Group's withdrawal. Harrison Group faces crisis as major client pulls out. Family drama behind billion-dollar breakup. Wall Street dynasty in turmoil. My assistant appeared with my morning coffee. Your family is in the lobby, Miss Harrison. All of them. I glanced at the security feed. Sure enough, the entire Harrison clan had assembled: Uncle Richard, James, Aunt Patricia, and even cousins who hadn't spoken to me in years. They looked decidedly less polished than usual, their designer clothes wrinkled from a sleepless night. Send them up, I said, straightening my jacket. It's time we had a proper family meeting. They filed into my office like chastened schoolchildren, their usual arrogance replaced by desperate uncertainty. The view from my penthouse suite, significantly higher than Uncle Richard's office, wasn't lost on them. Alexandra, Uncle Richard started, his voice hoarse. We need to talk about this. Now you want to talk? I gestured to the seats around my conference table. Please sit. I'm sure you have questions about my little online venture. James winced at his own words thrown back at him. How long have you been planning this? Planning? I pulled up financial projections on the wall screen. I've been building Montgomery Group for 7 years. Right under your noses, while you were all too busy mocking my career choices to notice. But why the deception? Aunt Patricia asked. Why not tell us? Would you have believed me? I countered. When have any of you ever taken me seriously? You couldn't even be bothered to read my resume properly yesterday. Uncle Richard leaned forward. We can fix this. The Harrison Group is your family's legacy too. Legacy? I laughed. Let's talk about legacy. When grandfather died, you all divided up his company like vultures. Made sure I got nothing because I didn't fit your image of success. That's not true, James protested weakly. Really? I pressed a button and audio recordings filled the room, years of family meetings, casual conversations, all documenting their systematic exclusion and mockery of my choices. She's not Harrison material. Can't trust her with real responsibility. Better keep her away from the important clients. I watched their faces as they heard their own voices, their own cruelty played back to them. I kept every recording, I said quietly. Every email, every snide comment. While you were building walls to keep me out, I was building something bigger than all of you. What do you want? Uncle Richard asked finally. Name your price. I stood up, walking to the window. 3 hours ago, Sterling Financial made an offer to buy the Harrison Group. Given your stock price this morning, it's more than generous. You can't be serious, James exploded. Sell to our biggest competitor? Actually, I'm not selling to your competitor. I turned back to face them. I'm selling to myself. Sterling Financial is another one of my companies. The silence that followed was absolute. They stared at me, finally understanding the scope of what I'd built while they weren't watching. The papers are here. I placed a thick folder on the table. Sign and the Harrison Group will be absorbed into my organization. Refuse and I'll withdraw all Montgomery Group investments immediately. Your choice. You're destroying our family, Aunt Patricia whispered. No, I corrected her. I'm saving it. Under my leadership, the Harrison Group will become what it should have been, A company built on merit, not nepotism. Where success is earned, not inherited. One by one they signed. Even James, his hand shaking as he surrendered his birthright to the cousin he'd underestimated for so long. What happens now? Uncle Richard asked, looking older than I'd ever seen him. Now. I collected the signed papers. Now you all get to experience what I did. Starting from the bottom, proving your worth. Those who can adapt will survive. Those who can't. I shrugged. There's always the family's little online ventures to fall back on. They left my office defeated, their empire now mine. As the door closed behind them, my phone buzzed with a news alert. Breaking. Harrison Group acquired by Sterling Financial, Wall Street dynasty under new leadership. I sat at my desk, looking at the photo of my grandfather that I kept hidden in my drawer. He'd always told me that true success wasn't about having the right name. It was about having the right vision. Was this what you meant, Grandpa? I whispered to his image. About building something that would make them all pay attention? My assistant's voice came through the intercom. Ms. Harrison? The Harrison Group's executive team is waiting for their new assignments. I smiled, tucking the photo away. Tell them their new CEO is on her way. It's time they learned how a state school graduate runs a real business. The next few months transformed the Harrison Group. Under my leadership, old hierarchies crumbled. James found himself working entry-level analysis, learning the business properly for the first time. Uncle Richard was relegated to a minor advisory role, watching as I implemented changes he'd resisted for years. Some family members adapted, finally showing the potential they'd always claimed to have. Others resigned, unable to handle working for the cousin they'd once dismissed. But all of them learned a valuable lesson about judging someone's worth by their appearance.